Good afternoon. Today we shall be discussing William Wordsworth's poem Tintern Abbey. It is William Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey, perhaps more than any other poem of the Romantic age, which reflects the change from the typical literature of Augustan England to that of the Romantic movement. The change constitutes, so the historians of thought have told us, a development away from purportedly rational and universal ways of looking at things toward more intuitive and individual insights. For instance, Pope's vindication of the ways of God to man was expressed very largely as a system of logically related ideas and arguments, a system which can communicate a great deal of itself to any rational human being, though of course its sum total may not carry the intended conviction. But Wordsworth's conviction that all which we behold is full of blessings, his sense of a lightening of the weary weight of all this unintelligible world, was manifestly the work of his intuitions. These intuitions may not have been unique, but they were not at any rate readily reducible to traditional and universal schemes of argumentation. They were largely dependent upon the personal, the local, and the particular. One is struck upon reading Tintern Abbey by the care with which the landscape before the poet's eye is described. Wordsworth has been commonly celebrated for his difference from the late 18th century extollers of the picturesque, for somehow expressing the spirit of the landscape rather than examining its composition as though it were to be the subject of a painting. In some such fashion, Wordsworth is indeed to be distinguished historically. One must always doubt whether it is desirable for any artist, even for a poet who is interested in the inner essence of some scene before him, to ignore the matter of outward arrangement. How does the spirit of the landscape communicate itself to the poet in the first place is a primary question that any nature poet ought to handle. Certainly it's not as a landscape to a blind man's eye. It expresses itself by its composition, its topography, its arrangement of vegetation, its placement of the works of man, lane, farmhouse, village and steeple, and of course by its colors and by its light and shade, both on the earth and in the sky. The spirit of a rolling landscape differs from that of a level plain, the spirit of a scene with rocky outcroppings from one without, the spirit of a partly cultivated, partly wooded valley from that of a hilltop heath. And not all of nature's compositions, as Wordsworth himself acknowledges in Ruth, proclaims the existence of a benevolent being within, one working at once in freedom and with restraint. Yet, the common opinion is perhaps correct. Wordsworth does not regularly pay close attention to the composition of the scene before him. He often presents no more than a sort of a catalogue of fragments of nature, of such items as mountains and lakes, listed in no particular or specific order. A spirit, or at any rate an emotion, is suggested to the reader by some emotive word found in the same sentence with the catalogue, but not by any significant vision evoked by the words mountains and lakes themselves. By such words, and of course by the ordinary devices of rhetoric, and by a versification occasionally reminiscent of Milton, for example, and of Milton's impassioned seriousness. But not so in Tintern Abbey. Here, while making use of the other devices as well, Wordsworth has looked also to the possibilities of the arrangement of natural objects before his eye, or at least before his mind's eye. He says, and I quote, "Once again do I behold the steep and lofty cliffs that on a wild secluded scene impress thoughts of more deep seclusion and connect the landscape with the quiet of the sky. The day is come when I again repose here under this dark sycamore and view these plots of cottage ground, these orchard tufts, which at this season with their unripe fruits are clad in one green hue and lose themselves mid groves and copses. Once again I see these hedgerows, hardly hedgerows, little lines of sportive wood run wild, these pastoral farms, green to the very door, and wreaths of smoke sent up in silence from among the trees, with some uncertain notice, as might seem, of vagrant dwellers in the houseless woods, or of some hermit's cave where by his fire the hermit sits alone. In this scene, Wordsworth might be said to have found or to have created what can be called the objective correlative for his philosophy of that period. Every detail in its composition is poetically significant. To realize this fact, one has only to think of contrast, of many South German landscapes, for instance, strikingly beautiful in their way. All human habitations crowd together into a village, and scarcely a tree is left among the houses to bear witness to the continued existence of that wild nature which man has repelled. Outside this concentration of masonry are wide stretches of ploughed land without bush, tree, or hedgerow. And then, perhaps a mile away, rises the forest, sudden, dark, ominous, impenetrable, as though civilization and primeval nature were living in an armed truce. To Wordsworth was suited rather the valley of the Wye, where all intermingled in harmony and unity, the grass green to the very door of the cottages, the plots of cottage ground and orchards losing themselves mid groves and copses, hedgerows and woodland uniting, wreaths of smoke telling that man was going about his labours even in the depths of the houseless woods. And lastly, a fact which Wordsworth noted first, the lofty cliffs connecting the somehow living, growing landscape with the quiet of the sky. In observing his last mentioned connection, as in observing all the others, Wordsworth is observing as a painter might observe, one who wished to create a composition whose diverse elements harmonized easily and gently, rather than a composition held together by some form of balanced poetic tensions. Yet surely in this last point of comparison, as in the others, Wordsworth is thinking not only as a painter, but even as a moralist. In this detail, as in the others, he is presenting to us a paysage moralism, the world of man, of pastoral farms and plots of cottage ground, merges gently through orchard and hedgerow into nature's copse and woodland. And the world of organic nature, by way of the lofty cliffs, merges gently with the inorganic quiet of the sky, with what is surely a symbol of the divine quiet, the eternal silence, as it is called in his Intimations Ode. Thus, in Wordsworth's philosophy, the human world is a way of the world of nature which is connected with the divine world. And here in the landscape, all three worlds are visibly interfused, even as Wordsworth felt they should be. To others, the heavens have declared the glory of God. To Wordsworth, the landscape of the Wye declared the unity of the universe. At least of that much of the universe as he was then accustomed to consider, for he later confessed that he had considered too little the calm but not the storm, perhaps the lamb but not the tiger in Blakean sense. Nowhere more magnificently than in Tintern Abbey does Wordsworth's imagery express this quietest phase of his philosophy. The greatly not to be desired life of the cities is characterized by din and noise. The nature which in early days had aroused in him feverish raptures had spoken through the sounding cataract. Now, in the valley of the Wye, upon his second visit, the sounds are less insistent. In place of the sounding cataract, he hears only a soft inland murmur. The din of human cities has been transposed into the still, sad music of humanity. Similarly, the soul's salvation is a pacification rather than an activation. The memories of the Wye had produced tranquil restoration. The sight of nature impresses the soul with quietness and beauty, and in preparation for the soul's seeing into the life of things, the eye is made quiet by the power of harmony, and this pacifying harmony is itself mute of sights rather than of sounds. Indeed, in the imagery of the poem, there are two progressions to quietness rather than just one. From din or noise to murmur to silence, and again from human life to vegetable life and to the cliff and the sky. There is almost a suggestion of a reversal of the great scale of being, as though at the summit of the scale were what Wordsworth was to describe in a Lucy poem as, quote unquote, the breathing balm, or the silence and the calm, or of mute insensate things. To say this much might be to say too much perhaps, for this perfect landscape, like nature's perfect child Lucy, was animal and vegetable as well as mineral, if these terms may be used without facetious intent. Yet it should be noted that 4 of the 5 places denominated in the poem at the great climax of Tintern Abbey as being in some way special dwellings of the deeply interfused presence are in the realm of inorganic nature. They are the light of the setting suns, the round ocean, the living air, and the blue sky. The Wordsworth may regard all these dwelling places as living. They are living silently and clearly without visible turbulence. Even the round ocean in this case is contemplated as from a distance, motionless and still. The celebrated 5th dwelling place that is in the mind of man has not yet been mentioned or elaborated by Wordsworth. As William Emerson has pointed out, this mind of man might well have been a grammatical anomaly, distinguished from the other dwellings by being awarded a preposition of its own. It would perhaps be fair to suggest that Wordsworth was yet to come to terms with the conflicting states of the human mind as it approaches to interpret nature. All said and done, Tintern Abbey can be interpreted as a poem of progress, from the mind's recognition of its dependence upon nature to a recognition of its ability to be at one with nature. As the external landscape at the opening of the poem testifies and eloquently does so, nature is uniform and unchanging in the poem, as the evolving movement of the poet's perception throughout the poem testifies. The mind is progressive, and how the mind is progressive and how its progressiveness can come in future to be at one with nature is perhaps the true subject of this poem.